for staying tuned with us. We will now move on to the next panel discussion on COVID-19 hits, misses, and hidden pandemic. I welcome the moderator for the session, Mr. Vikas Dandekar, editor, Pharma and Healthcare, ET Prime, to kick off the discussion.
Thanks so much, Paridhi, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining me today for this very important session with very distinguished co-panelists that I have. As Paridhi mentioned, I write for ET Prime on healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and I will be your moderator for this session. On behalf of BioAsia 2021, it is a pleasure to welcome you today to today's session on hits and misses and the hidden pandemic. But before we move more into the detailed discussions, let me introduce to you Dr. Trevor Mundel, who is the president at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Healthcare. And he's a man of science. His Twitter handle says, "Science is my passion." Dr. Mundel, to introduce him briefly, Dr. Mundel leads the foundation's efforts to develop high-impact interventions against leading causes of death and disability in developing countries. He manages the foundation's disease-specific R&D investments in HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, pneumonia, enteric and diarrheal diseases, and neglected tropical diseases. So it's not about healthcare. He's also a PhD from University of Chicago. So with that introduction, may I have his video to play out for a short special address?
Good afternoon. I'm honored to speak with you today in this 18th year of BioAsia and to lead off the very distinguished panel gathered here virtually for a discussion of the lessons to be gleaned from the COVID-19 pandemic. One lesson, a welcome one, is that India has emerged as a leader in the global fight against COVID-19 because of its great capacity for manufacturing vaccines and its expanding capacity for developing them too. India makes 60% of all vaccines, 70% for LMICs with UNICEF and Gavi support. India has made great advances in vaccine development, and BMGF has been pleased to collaborate with Serum Institute of India, Bharat Biotech, and BioE, some of your great companies. Through Gavi, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has provided funding to enable Serum Institute to accelerate manufacturing of up to 200 million doses of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines for low and middle income countries at less than $3 per dose. Our foundation also provided funding to BioE to accelerate manufacturing of up to 100 million doses. In collaboration with the Indian Council of Medical Research, Bharat is developing Covaxin, India's first indigenous COVID-19 vaccine. Bharat is also working on BBV154, a non-invasive, needle-free, intranasal COVID-19 vaccine. That would be a huge advance. Another positive development has been the global leadership demonstrated by India's government. The Vaccine Maitri, or Vaccine Friendship Initiative, has leveraged India's manufacturing capacity to put the nation at the forefront of distribution of COVID-19 vaccines to countries around the world. This will be crucial in equitable distribution of COVID-19 to lower and middle income countries. Through Serum Institute, India has supplied 16.7 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine to 20 countries as it vaccinates its own population. The Indian government has also cleared supply of 34.5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to 25 countries on a commercial basis. Also, India has agreed to supply 10 million vaccine doses to Africa and 1 million to the United Nations healthcare workers under the COVAX facility coordinated by the World Health Organization and Gavi. India's strong commitment to R&D has also put it at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19. The foundation provided support to government entities, including the Department of Biotechnology, the Indian Council of Medical Research, NITI Aayog, the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, and state governments. The Department of Biotechnology's Pan-India 1000 SARS-CoV-2 RNA genome sequencing program, launched in May last year, has played a crucial role in development of diagnostic testing kit validation, and antiviral testing, as well as in identifying new strains of the virus. In terms of misses, the pandemic has exposed major weaknesses, global ones, of long-standing inequities. These are evident in the pandemic's impact: greater than 2 million lives lost, 100 million sickened, lost school class time for 1.5 billion children at least, and a global recession. In lower middle income countries, the pandemic has increased poverty, strained health systems, potentially setting back progress against potential killers such as HIV, TB, and malaria. While the COVAX facility has been a shining example of international cooperation, global vaccine equity has not been achieved. COVID-19 vaccine export controls, bidding wars, go-it-alone vaccine development in many developed countries. This highlights the value of India's strong pharma sector and its focus on serving the world. We hope that other regions, such as Africa, are also able to develop vaccine manufacturing platforms to form a global network of regional manufacturers. Despite lapses in international cooperation, the pandemic demonstrates that all health is global. No country is safe unless all are safe. The virus thriving anywhere in the world makes the emergence of new variants inevitable. For example, it may not be entirely coincidental that an early COVID variant took hold in South Africa, which has the world's biggest HIV epidemic with greater than 20% of the population infected. Lots of people in South Africa, even those on antivirals, are immunosuppressed. Many individuals can be chronically infected with COVID, and even a single individual can generate dangerous variants. Lower middle income countries often lack the resources needed for effective disease surveillance, which makes it harder to see and to know what pathogens are circulating. This in turn makes it more likely that pathogens will spread unimpeded to other geographies. South Africa has a relatively strong pathogen surveillance system, which in part is why they identified the B1351 variant there first. India's growing capacity for sequencing and its innovation in vaccines might be invaluable in helping counter the emergence of these variants. In short, global health security depends on reducing the burden of infectious disease and strengthening health systems in every corner of the globe. This is the most important lesson of the current pandemic, and as we look beyond it, this is the major challenge that faces us.
Right. Absolutely. So that sets the tone for our discussions. In fact, Dr. Trevor Mundel, thank you so much. Dr. Trevor Mundel, thank you so much for that very important special address, and it actually touches all.
What we should aim for is a new normal, a re-energized global health ecosystem, not a return to the state of the world in February 2020. The pandemic has led to previously unimaginable scientific and technological innovation, public and private collaborations, and behavior change on a global scale. How can the urgency around COVID-19 be extended to other long-standing diseases, the silent epidemics? Potentially productive opportunities include accelerated vaccine manufacturing. Hexapro is a new version of the spike protein designed by University of Texas scientists, and this could enable much faster and more stable production of vaccines worldwide. Hexapro produces up to 10 times more protein than that of an earlier synthetic spike protein already in use in multiple COVID-19 vaccines, and we'd love to see this widely deployed. Globally connected systems for disease detection. Next generation sequencing has become widely available in lower middle income countries, and next generation sequencing data stored securely in a global cloud with open source bioinformatics and workflows could be used for local interpretation of findings, which could also help with early detection of future pandemics. The digital frameworks for diagnostics currently existing and utilized to manage testing and delivery of results via smartphones, well, these systems have the potential to incorporate geolocation and centralized data aggregation to improve disease detection and predictive capabilities. The global community can begin to work to define the necessary norms, specifications, and processes to implement this technology widely and increase its use in lower middle income countries. India has enormous potential to make major contributions to global health. In addition to its strengths in biotechnology and pharmaceutical manufacturing, I'll mention two areas where India has great opportunities. In digital health, India's National Digital Health Mission is a crucial step towards strengthening health systems and ensuring efficiency and transparency in access to healthcare. In artificial intelligence, AI holds immense promise to strengthen diagnostics, surveillance systems, and rapid development of therapies. AI will be crucial in strengthening our public health systems to effectively manage future challenges like COVID-19. An example is the testing tool for COVID-19 developed by Wadhwani Institute, which uses artificial intelligence to screen for COVID-19 based cough sounds. This non-invasive testing tool holds significant potential for scaling up testing capacities and for use in identifying other diseases that impact the lungs, most importantly from our perspective, tuberculosis.
Thanks so much, Dr. Trevor Mundel, for that very important speech. And actually touched upon all the key elements that we have seen over the last 12 months, from vaccine inequities to the strains, to the research, and of course, testing the challenges. So thanks so much again. Now to set the ball rolling into the discussion, and I'm sure it will become a very sharp and incisive discussion with so many distinguished panelists joining me. So I would like to quickly introduce them to you. Dr. Renu Swarup, she's the secretary to the Department of Biotechnology, has been having a very busy time, but thanks, Dr. Swarup, for joining us. You've been the face of biotechnology for us, and in so many international conferences, you've been the flagship bearer. So thank you so much. Dr. Venugopal Somani, Drug Controller General of India, in the middle of so many important announcements, he's been having a very busy time. So thanks again, Dr. Somani, also for joining us. Dr. Richard Hatchett heads up CEPI in the middle of so many, vaccine issues. And what a time CEPI was formed 2017, as if it was getting ready for this pandemic. So we'd like to hear a lot from Dr. Richard Hatchett also, and Dr. Peter Payot. So who can be better than him in terms of telling us about the virology of the virus? So, and Dr. Naresh Trehan needs no introduction. Heads up Medanta, a very well-known cardiac surgeon and a prolific speaker. So thanks so much for joining us, all of you. Let me start by prodding Dr. Renu Swarup on this issue about the last 12 months, ma'am. From the hits and misses, if we are to stick to the theme, definitely, the curve has been going down, and it's very heartening to see that. It's probably have been much more than the misses, but if you are to see it in perspective, in hindsight, what are the things that you would like to set right if you had the chance?
Thank you, Vikas. Very important theme that you put in, the hits, the misses, and the pandemic. I think, first of all, it's important for us to understand that the pandemic came to us obviously as a surprise, because nobody was preparing for a pandemic. Even when CEPI, we became the founding members of it, we were always looking at the epidemics and probably a disease X that we were all focusing on. And I'm sure Richard will tell you more about that. But the pandemic was the last thing on our minds at that point of time. But yes, I think if I speak on behalf of the scientific community, this year has definitely been a year of challenges because of the pandemic, enormous challenges, from the healthcare challenges to the economic front to the the schools and the livelihoods, the food and nutrition, all challenges before us, with obviously the travel, the mobility that we lost during this year, but a huge opportunity for the science and technology. An opportunity for the science and technology to be able to deliver, to be able to stand up to the expectations of the society. And they did it. And I think that really has been the hit that we will talk about. Whether it's the diagnostics, whether it's been the vaccines, the way it's been a coordinated, consolidated effort, which has been definitely driven by the respective nations because each has their own priority, but aligned to a common goal that we all looked at, and that is how do we collectively fight this COVID? And now, in the recent few weeks, there has been an even more emphasis on understanding the virus, the genome sequencing. So it's broadly from looking at the virus, understanding the virus, identifying testing and diagnostic methods to it, and of course the treatment, which is important and still going on. And in India, we've had a large number of groups also working on some of the natural products, which is again very important for us. And then, of course, the most important, vaccines. And if I'll just stay on the vaccines, I think that gave us so much of a learning. And you asked, if you would look back, what is it that you would feel that this year should have been? I won't say what this year should have been, but what has this taught us? I think what it has taught us now is how are we going to be prepared for future pandemics? We had already built a foundation with the CEPI, and India was one of the first founder members there. We started our own in-CEPI component, and that in-CEPI was to create an ecosystem here. We had launched a national biopharma mission at the same time. With this, we'd already set a foundation for promoting research and innovation, shared infrastructure, access to shared facilities by different research groups, and that's what came handy at this point of time for the COVID vaccine. We have now been able to create a very robust ecosystem. We all know about our robust pipeline of vaccines. We know that 2 with emergency use authorization granted, a couple of them in the phase 3 clinical trials, others in phase 1 and phase 2, some in late stage preclinical trials. So while vaccine development is being supported by the Department of Biotechnology and ICMR and working with Health Ministry, BIRAC, which is our public sector, is actually implementing Mission COVID Suraksha, which is our Indian mission for vaccine development. We've created a very robust immunoassay lab network, animal challenge facilities, created a very strong clinical trial network of more than 52 sites. So this is our learning, and this is not going to stop with COVID. This is going to go beyond COVID. And I think, so what's going to go beyond COVID is our learning of collaboration, of consolidation, of convergence of all the excellent leads that we've had. And I think this is something that we are now proud of. We hope that this will be able to take us into any future pandemic that comes in. So that really is what is through the hits and the misses and the learning. What did we miss? I think what we missed is not having this before the pandemic. If we did have it before the pandemic, we would have probably saved on those 6 months or so that we did to get our diagnostics within the country. Our vaccines would probably have taken as much time, but yes, at least our platform technologies would be ready. And I think that's what we are doing right now. That's really what the COVID pandemic has taught us, but definitely an exemplary year for the scientists and the technologists and their response to the fight against COVID.
Absolutely. Yeah, what a year, and a well put, exemplary year, for scientists and regulators and everyone who is engaged in this whole pandemic control. With the issue coming on the regulators' play, Dr. Somani, in terms of approvals and all, I'm sure there must have been a lot of pressure, in terms of getting vaccine approvals first, especially after, the 11th December approval that came from US FDA for Pfizer's vaccine, and you actually. The subject expert committee decided against an approval, unless there is a proper bridging studies and clinical trials. You've been at the center of so many important meetings and subject expert committee, conversations. Where do you think, things could have been done better? Because, like it or not, sir, there have been a lot of conversations and debates about the approval processes. I mean, today we are actually in a position to supply so many vaccines to so many countries, and the timely response has been so much more appreciated. but do you think things could be set right? In fact, for many regulators, things have been so much of a mystery. So, what would be your thoughts on that?
Uh, Thank you, organizer, and thank you, Vikas ji, for giving this opportunity. Of course, it was not only with the vaccines. The story started because when the lockdown was first imposed, we never had a simple diagnostic kits in our country. So when not a single diagnostic kits to having a 400 supplier and 50% of them manufacturers in India, and then came the supply of oxygen, then the issue of approving or allowing the use of plasma, then approving the remdesivir, favipiravir, rituximab, and then the vaccine. All these things have been, has had to be done in a timely manner. If the things have not been done in a timely manner, with because in the time of pandemic, people have a relatively more flexible approach. They are ready to accept more risk in the light of benefit they are going to get from the therapeutic options. Therefore, the emergency approval processes which and the way of digital working through our subject expert committees and through our evaluation processes and having collaboration with UKMHRA, USFDA on daily basis with their actual scientists with regards to each and every data of each clinical trial participant, that has been quite useful. And we have made it a point that India has always it in our mind that access to affordable and quality medicine at the speed with which it is required is the key thing for us. Access to affordable quality medical products and at the speed with which it is required. If we miss any of this component, then we are lost. So therefore, we started, our teams were there at the plants where the research and development was going on, at the where the animal studies were going on, where the actual testing of the vaccines was going on, validation of batches of going on, and also the evaluation of the data which is emerging from the Indian trial, bridging trial, and also from the foreign trial, that all the things we were looking at very carefully. And after the approval of the Pfizer's vaccines, of course, there was an enthusiasm in our country, but definitely looking at the entire Indian and global population programmatic suitability, it needed to be uh, suited into our actual immunization program, the way we run it at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, the way our people are trained, and also we needed a kind of things which can serve the nation and international community better. So we worked very hard to see that we get the reasonable and well acceptable results, and we have been successfully able to do that in all the cases which I have told you. And of course, we worked day and night, I can tell you, for entire our regulatory system. And it was really very exciting period. I won't say very challenging. What if you ask me what we could miss in this, because definitely the life cycle of the regulatory system was a little bit disturbed. It was not possible to maintain the normal productions, the complete level of high standards of the GMP inspections, or the inspection physically to do that. The clinical trials, there were the participants, their follow up and all those things were not easily possible to maintain the way they are maintained into the protocol. So we had to make a proper regulatory guidance and guidelines to accommodate this deviation and still not miss on the risk benefit analysis, safety efficacy analysis, and also not on the inclusion exclusion and endpoint criteria, so that those deviations are also taken into considerations and how we can go ahead. So time to time, having the discussions with the all collaborators, maintaining our hand holding approach, that has, and also utilizing the digital platform and collaborating with the international community of the regulators, that has helped us to come out. And also in between we had to change the regulations also. At some places we never had the regulation for stockpiling of the vaccines. So we started the stockpiling when we got the first 3 batches of the highest quality and the best quality. We started stockpiling it while the trials were still going on. And the day the trials have succeeded, we have found a sufficient result. We already had 6 to 7 crore, we can say 60 to 70 million stock in our hand. So we were ready to go. And that's how we were able to fulfill the India's need for the frontline workers, healthcare workers, and also of the international needs. So this is the way we have worked, and this has been a very exciting and interesting time, and it has taught a lot many things. It has fast forwarded so many things, and it has taught us the many ways, new ways of regulatory oversight over all these activities, whether it is research, preclinical studies, or clinical studies, or GMP manufacturing, post-marketing surveillance, testing of the IVD kits, or means testing means post-marketing quality surveillance by regulators with regards to their quality, and we have been maintaining it. Thank you very much. I will stop here.
Right. Yeah, so I'll come back to you, sir, on a few more granular questions on transparency and how the regulatory process can become more transparent, as we have actually seen in the case of US FDA, where subject expert committees, equivalent advisory committees meet in the open, and actually they discuss, on public platforms. So if that can be a good learning. Next set of questions will be on that. So let me get in Dr. Richard Hatchett on that. Sir, you've been in the middle of so many, funding of vaccines. And of course, COVAX also, where CEPI plays a very important role. And we have seen the inequities, and my previous panel led by Divya also discussed about the vaccine inequities. How do you see this panning out about this from the funding side to the delivery side, and your role as part of COVAX, which is a very important collaboration?
Sure. No, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sorry I couldn't be in Hyderabad. I remember on a previous visit visiting Terminar, obviously, which is a monument to the end of another epidemic, and let us all hope that we will be building similar monuments very soon to mark the end of COVID-19. COVAX is, in fact, the only global initiative under the ACT Accelerator, certainly, dedicated to ending the pandemic, not to protecting a particular population here or there, but to ending the pandemic by attacking its root cause. The design of COVAX was very carefully thought out to facilitate global access to vaccine products, and that was done by coupling the investments that CEPI was making in research and development, and we ultimately have invested in 11 vaccine products, including the program at Biological E that Dr. Datla mentioned in the previous panel, and some of the tech transfer arrangements to Serum Institute of India. But we coupled our investments in research and development with access commitments. We made the receipt of our funds that was tied directly to establishing access commitments to what ultimately became the COVAX facility. And through those access commitments, we were able to secure essentially the first position in line, customer number one, for over 1 billion doses for the COVAX facility. We were concerned from very early on that as vaccines became available and as it became clear which vaccines were going to be successful, that particularly the high-income countries would place purchase orders and potentially buy up global supplies. I think we're very fortunate in that we have had a number of vaccine candidates successfully complete phase 3 trials. We certainly did not know that that would be the case when we initiated these efforts, last January and February. But we have seen a large number of bilateral purchase arrangements totaling billions of doses of vaccine. And if we had not put those purchase agreements in place for COVAX and secured that first right of refusal for COVAX, there is a potential that COVAX could have been forced out of the market or put at the end of the line, and that would have resulted in, even more significant delays in delivering vaccines to countries all around the world. We're about 2.5 months into the global vaccination program at this point. The first high-income countries began delivering vaccine roughly in mid-December. I believe the number of doses that have been distributed at this point now exceeds around 140 million doses globally. But those doses are significantly concentrated in just a few countries. And there are over 100 countries where no vaccines have been administered at all. And that there's thus a widening equity gap. And as that equity gap widens and as some countries begin to emerge from the pandemic by virtue of having protected their populations, that will create tremendous and understandable and righteous tension between countries. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. The only way out of the pandemic is by addressing it everywhere. For the last year, much of the last year, we cited two main arguments in defense of securing and ensuring equitable access. Those were the argument from ethics because it was the right thing to do, and the argument from economics or enlightened self-interest that even if a country protected its own population because it is integrated into the global economy, if the global economy continues to be impacted by the pandemic, no country can escape, even if they protect their own populations. And I think recent months have added a third, and interestingly, perhaps the most compelling argument, which is the argument from biology, which is that if the virus continues to circulate unchecked, it will have opportunities to mutate and thus opportunities to evade the countermeasures that we have, and thus to take back all of the advances of the last year. So at this point, I'm very encouraged to see the high-income countries, the G7 most recently, just on Friday, begin to make very substantial and real and new commitments of resources towards a goal, not of protecting their own populations, but of ending the pandemic globally. At CEPI, we're delighted that we've been able to play a part in that and to play a role in creating the institutions that we believe will be important for distributing vaccine globally. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Hatchett, for that very exhaustive overview of where CEPI stands. Before we move to Dr. Pierre and Dr. Naresh Trehan, I have to ask a quick question to Dr. Somani. I think he's got a meeting to attend. So before we kind of release him from this panel discussion, a very quick question, sir. I mean, now we are actually talking about international regulators kind of synchronizing their efforts so that approvals come up faster. Anything that you would like to share on that process, and how do you want to make this approval process? I know, I mean, approval of a vaccine in less than 10 months itself is seen as a miracle. So what is in store for the Indian regulatory system so far as new reforms are concerned, of being on the same platform as other international regulators are concerned?
So collaboration and cooperation, because already we have had a group of regulators, which we call as ICMRA and also WHO, who were meeting on almost weekly or fortnightly basis to decide on what should be the mechanism to decide on the various preclinical chemical characterization, preclinical studies, what would be the more appropriate model, what sort of design should be there for the clinical trials, and all those things were very well defined, and cooperation is already going on, and that has helped us a lot. And because of that, we were able to reach to and this level. And we also have a bilateral whenever we need cooperation, and just have a video conferences with the international regulators whomsoever we want of interest wherever the trials are going on, to share our experience. And if this continues, and this because of these digital platforms, it has become really so easy with public expectations on with regards to the transparency. We already put all our decisions and recommendations on the our website, and they are available. People may have a different kind of opinions about that, but we are fully confident that what is happening and how much the things are going on in the directions, because the subject expert committees, whatever we have, because it is not only our inspectorate who are looking at the files and the plants and the testing, it is also the subject expert committee. And not only that, thereafter the entire DCGI has to agree for what has been, depending on whatever the neutralization antibody titers we are getting, what are the safety results we are getting, in how much percentage of population we are getting, whether the preclinical studies, whether they are carried out in neutralization assays, they are with the live virus or the pseudo virus. All these things are taken into the consideration, and based on that, because to approve something in India is not a very, because to give it to 1.3 billion population, it was a very big challenging task for us. And we have learned a lot, many things through the cooperation and collaboration, and we would continue to maintain that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Thanks so much for making time for this, sir. What do you have to say about the strains that are coming up? How can we be more prepared? As most of the scientists are now actually kind of evaluating how do we actually come to a one single universal vaccine. Do you think that's the way forward?
Thank you very much, Vikas, and happy to be here. Actually, a year ago, I was in Hyderabad for BioAsia and gave a talk on, are we ready for the next pandemic? And it was about the pandemic was coming. To be honest, I didn't realize that what was in the pipeline, the first cases of COVID-19 in India had been identified. I think it was in Goa. And here we are now. So, and the answer to my question was that no, we're not ready, and not a single country. Even countries that marked very high in the rankings on epidemic preparedness, like the US and the UK, did not do exactly a great job. So it's really the whole world has been, I would say, taken by surprise. Although virologists and people like Richard and I, we knew it would happen. That's why CEPI was set up, and we just didn't know when and with what virus. I made one mistake. I always thought it would be some new type of influenza virus, but it was the coronavirus. Okay, so now I think after a year, we've learned a lot. We heard that in this panel and the previous one. And of course, one major breakthrough has been that we have a vaccine. And frankly, we are been lucky, because let's not forget that, for example, for HIV, but nearly 40 years later, we still don't have a vaccine. So it depends a bit also on the kind of virus. And now what is in the news now are the so-called variants and mutants. And again, as virologists, we're not surprised. That's what viruses do, and they do it for a good reason from their perspective, not from our perspective. And that is that they try to escape against, from anything that we try to do to suppress it, be it our immune response, be it vaccine later on. And that's why we have these variants, these strains. But we shouldn't panic for every mutation or variant that will come up. And because the good news is we're going to sequence more and more, so we will unavoidably find more variants. However, there are a few variants that we have to be really mindful of. So the first thing is that when we sequence more and we find mutations, is try to find out what do they mean biologically, either in increased transmission, as was documented for B117, and I Soumya Swaminathan said that there will be a new classification announced, and I hope it will be pronounceable. But you know, that is highly the British variant. It's a more transmissible, maybe a slightly higher mortality. But the good news is it's frankly covered by the vaccines. We had a variant in South Africa, in Brazil, where the may be more complicated, that some vaccines are not as effective. But again, the good news is, at least for one vaccine that has been tested in a trial in South Africa, and that included also people who were at risk for developing severe disease and hospitalization and death, because at the end of the day, what do we expect from a vaccine in the first place? That people don't end up in the hospital, people don't die. And then also we hope that it will interrupt transmission. Now that the Janssen, the J&J vaccine was as effective in preventing severe disease and you know, and death and hospitalization in among people who were infected with the South African variant as in the US as the comparator, where there was another major part of the study. For other vaccines like AstraZeneca, we don't know because there were no people in there at high risk. In spite of that, the WHO, you know, recommended it even for use in populations where there is this variant, which I simply don't understand because that's not supported by data. The South African government said, no, we wait until we have the data. So the message is we need to know. So that's why sequencing is really important. We need to have immediate, you know, measures to test them, whether they are, you know, protected by the vaccines. And then also, and that's really in Richard Hatch's area in CEPI, we need more efficient systems to develop, you know, vaccines that can act against these variants in case they don't work. This is where I think the 100 days is that the CEPI has, you know, is advocating for, is definitely realistic. It's not realistic for another HIV type of virus, but for the variants and the new, that would be problematic for us, that's possible. We need also then the regulators to agree, hopefully around the world, that, you know, that India and the FDA and the EMA, that they have the same criteria so that vaccine manufacturers know and developers, okay, this is what we need to have our vaccine approved in terms of safety criteria, but also efficacy and with surrogate indicators. So I'm actually relatively optimistic in the sense that even the variants like in that appeared in South Africa and in Brazil, it's not that they're going to make vaccines ineffective. It's not an all or nothing. At the worst, at the moment, they may be slightly ineffective, but we need to prepare for the worst case scenario. And that's where we need all these systems in place and not be taken by surprise. But the last year has proven that we have the technology, thanks to, you know, as Renu Swarup said, you know, the investments in basic research. It's because thanks to that we have these new types of vaccines like messenger RNA and then other viral vectors. So, but it's no time to lose. We cannot wait and sit and until we're confronted with a big problem. We have to act now. So I think it's a mixed message, as so often in this epidemic. Good news, but also be very, very vigilant. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Piot. In fact, I was checking a Fortune magazine article, which actually said that we should not end up becoming a cat and mouse chase, which becomes perpetual, and to kind of move ahead of this chase and actually get a grip on the virus. So hopefully we'll reach that point sometime. Dr. Trehan, thank you so much for your patience. And, you know, we've discussed so much of virus and vaccines, and now it's your turn on the whole hidden pandemic. And being a cardiac surgeon, I saw 48,000 surgeries. So it's like you have the heart in the right place. What has been your observations? I mean, how do you think that hospitals can become both well prepared for a pandemic situation, yet not give up its hold on other, healthcare issues?
Good evening and thank you, Nandika, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And I enjoyed every delivery that was on now. So it's not patience, it was more a learning experience, which is great. So from our point of view, the clinical point of view, and if you talk about hits, I think the biggest achievement that happened in India was the fact that we were able to pull ourselves together to be able to battle this unprecedented pandemic, which of course in our lifetime we had never experienced it. But India as a country, whether it be the government that took decisive action from the very beginning, whether it was the healthcare workers and the frontline workers, or whether it was the public, all three actually played a very important role in this whole recovery. So I think from a national level, we were able to control the spread very effectively. And also we learned very quickly on from the medical side how to treat it. I remember from the 14 Italians who first came to Medanta, I mean, we had no idea what the virus was about and how to treat it, but very quickly our medical teams pulled together the entire program of how to effectively control the malady at different stages of the virus. Of course, one of the biggest things that happened here was the knowledge sharing, data sharing around the world. So if it wasn't for the 50 autopsies done by the doctors in Bergamo against the instructions of WHO, where they actually defined the pathophysiology of the disease and death process, we would have had a much worse outcome of this pandemic. So there are sentinel events that take place where we can actually bank upon and look back and say, how did we make that difference? So if you look at it, when we got hit, we had no PPEs, we had no masks, we had not enough ventilators. The world was actually going around trying to pick up ventilators and PPEs anywhere in the world, but you must give credit to our industry, to our scientists, and the collaboration between the medical profession and the industry to actually ramp up. So we were, to give you an example, we were actually working with a company which was making the prototype for Agua ventilator, which was 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh ventilator, where anything else was costing 12, 14, 20 lakhs. So we were working with them, and we actually day and night ramped up. Maruti, Mr. Bhargav came to their aid also and ramped up their manufacturing so that we are now exporting it to all over the world. So there are many things happened. There were other ventilators also developed. PPEs we really do not need anything from anywhere in the world. We are exporting. So I think that collaborative effort to fight this terrible disease was what has put India on a footing where we have come out with relatively less number of infections, but very little deaths. So this is an accomplishment as a country, and credit goes to everybody, like I just mentioned, all the three pillars of this fight. Now, what were the misses? The misses basically was that we had never thought that before this kind of thing happened, so there were weaknesses in our health delivery system, in our infrastructure, in our training. Of course, we made up for it very quickly, and that 3 months of lockdown, which was intense, made it possible to really ramp up and be able to deliver to our country the best medical care you could find. Of course, then there was remdesivir developed somewhere else, favipiravir another, and in record time, our scientists developed the vaccine. This is an amazing story to be written about, and future generations would actually read about the accomplishment of the worldwide network of scientists who delivered this whole thing. So now the point is, where are we today? So as I said, the misses were that the people who were suffering from other diseases, who needed attention, then were sidelined in this whole effort to fight the pandemic. And many people lost their lives. Diabetics got out of control with their diabetes. Many people died from urgent surgeries that they needed. There was heart attacks. People missed their checkups. So many things happened which were not something to be very happy about. But overall, then the whole balance came out. So what would we do differently next time? I would think that we should immediately separate the services for dealing with the pandemic or an epidemic, and so that the general work or the elective work or the semi-urgent work or the urgent work, which is non-COVID, would continue in some institutions. So I think those are the learnings from this about that, so that nobody in the population would suffer. Now let's come to the challenge. Now, Dr. Hatchett also talked about, Mr. Hatchett, about the fact that 100 countries have no vaccine. In a country like ours, where we have a population of 1.3, 1.4 billion people, we have only been able to vaccinate 10 million. So we need to ramp up very quickly, because if we are going to see the backside of this terrible virus, in addition to the natural immunity which people have developed, which we are discovering in some pockets that people have antibodies, even 45, 50% have antibodies. That means they were either suffered, exposed, but they never experienced it. So whatever it may be, we need to add on very quickly another 30%, 40% of the population that can be vaccinated and develop immunity so that the country can look ahead. Now, how we do it? Good thing about India is that the capacity is there. The capacity to inoculate, the capacity for the production of vaccines. More and more vaccines are getting approved. So we need to get on with the job ASAP, whatever it takes. So there is a very active dialogue going on in the government right now, how to make a PPP model between the public services and the private services to give vaccine to as many people as possible, starting with, it happened with the healthcare workers, the frontline workers, and now the more vulnerable population. So the faster we can go, the better off we'll be as a country, because the number of people who are still out there exposed, and there are some indicators that 5 states have shown a rising number. This should be a great warning to us.
Yeah.
And that we need to ramp up for that. And then we would have completed our picture. I'll stop there.
Right. Thanks so much, Dr. Trehan, for that very comprehensive details on what were the experiences during the pandemic, and then what we need to do now in terms of ramping up vaccines. That brings me to Dr. Renu Swarup again. Ma'am, being from the government, I have to ask you this question. There has been a mounting pressure from a lot of doctors and medical experts on actually engaging private companies and private market to really reach that goal of 30 crore at least, by August. What kind of a thinking process do you have right now in the government? Do you think that's something that will be allowed sooner than late?
So I was hoping Dr. Paul will be on this panel, and he would have taken this question well as the chair of the NECVAC, which we all collectively sit and decide on the strategy on how that will be done. But I think there are 2 points which are important, which have been talked about, and that is the private sector being involved even now in terms of some of the sessions which have been set up. We've had a number of them which are involved in the vaccination program. Moving forward, the 30 crore, which is the current priority list, the discussions on the guidelines as to how the private sector would be more deeply engaged in doing that are under consideration, and I think very soon those should be made available. Discussions have been happening with the private sector as well, so that how this could be speeded up. Use of technology, use of private sector too. We do understand that there is this large number, which is obviously a very large number to vaccinate. There are also considerations in terms of the supply part of it. So you have to sort of balance the supply and the demand to see what is the supply available and how do you bring that match that to the demand that is available. So all that is being discussed, and I'm sure very soon there will be more clarity and more guidelines which will make this clearer in terms of how this will be. But I think one point which is very clear within the country is for the healthcare sector, as for others, the private sector has been a very important player, and they continue to be so even in this time of the pandemic as we move forward for vaccinations.
Perfect. Ma'am, while you are actually speaking, I'd probably like to go for a wrap-up session with all our speakers who are present here. So far, the image that we had about Indian research, about Indian innovation, and now you've seen so many examples, the hidden pandemic, and then the pandemic itself has actually thrown up so many opportunities where actually the government came up very quickly in terms of supporting the private sector initiatives, from ventilators and everything that came in the innovation process. Do you think this probably can be a change opportunity, the way Indian research has been happening, and your role in BIRAC itself, I mean, as being a fountainhead of so many entrepreneurial enterprises? What do you want to say about this? Does this pandemic really bring that change now? Because, from that slow, process of backing new startups in innovation, do you think that that can actually change now?
So, Vikas, you made a very important point. I think what we need to look at is you'll have to sort of step back a bit. And the reason why this happened, as I said right now, is because we had started building up this very strong foundation. When the Honorable Prime Minister launched the Startup Action Plan in 2016, thereon there have been policy enablers which have facilitated the vibrant startup ecosystem to be available, the partnerships between the academia and the industry, which have been strengthened during these last couple of years. And this, with the pandemic coming in, and as I started by saying that this was truly a collective collaboration because we all took on ownership, accountabilities to deliver for a common goal. These collaborations, these foundations which had been built could very quickly be activated to come together to respond to this challenge. And moving forward, now that they have been able to exhibit the sense of urgency, the sense of vibrancy, and in one way demonstrated what a successful outcome is of this experiment which was put together of having startups. We created these large number of incubators, we created these accelerator centers, we created these networks of academia industry. Moving ahead, we are now setting up these translational clusters with universities, research institutes, industry, startups. So this is the next wave that's going to come forward. And I'm confident that we will see the seamless flow of R&D from laboratories through the translational phase for the product development. And this pandemic gave us an opportunity to be able to experiment it and bring out the best in everyone. I'm sure there will be no looking back, and it will move forward with a much more, I would say, sense of urgency, but more than anything else, a sense of responsibility which each scientist and each stakeholder in this ecosystem has taken on.
Right. Yeah. Great to hear that, ma'am. Thank you so much for that very nice comment about where we are headed in terms of the innovation circle. Dr. Hatchett, to you, sir, you have experimented with so many vaccine initiatives in this very short time, and in your previous role also as acting director at BARDA. If we are to, see from your lens about the Indian innovation system, going forward, what would be the message for the Indian ecosystem, for Indian entrepreneurs or Indian pharmaceutical companies? How do you see this going forward? Basically, seeing your international perspective will be of great help.
Sure, no, thank you. And just to build on what Dr. Swarup said, as a friend and of Indian innovation, Indian science, but as an outsider, it really has been inspiring to see the coordination within the Indian system, across government, across academic partners. India will have played. India is a large country, but it will have played an outsized role in the global response through the contributions of Indian industry. Indian laboratories are part of global laboratory networks that CEPI is supporting. India has really stepped up to the plate, and we are deeply grateful for the collaborations and the contributions that India is making to providing for global vaccine supply. Going forward, I would say that coming out of the pandemic, we are going to need to see more of the kind of collaboration and cooperation that Dr. Trehan mentioned, and the kind of systems focus that Dr. Piat described. I do think there will be a global consensus around addressing pandemic threats in the future. I think there are technological opportunities that will emerge from the pandemic because of, we've compressed a decade of technology development into just a year, and a convergence of political will that we need to address these threats systematically. And I think India will play a very important role in that global effort going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. From your website, I picked up 3 points which are very, very important. The cost of a pandemic is $570 billion of a severe to a moderately severe nature, 11 diseases identified as a public health risk, and $2.8 billion for the minimum cost of advancing a vaccine. And that probably brings India into the focus because of its low cost of innovation. And maybe, perhaps it can have a very, very central role in controlling future pandemics. Dr. Peter Piot, your turn, sir. How do you see this going forward? Of course, my previous colleague, Divya, also mentioned about where do we head from here in terms of the pandemic. Where do you think we will see things coming back? Because just when we actually thought that it's coming to an end, now we have new surprises in the streets.
Well, there will always be surprises. That's the spice of life. But the top priority is really to vaccinate, and universally along the lines that Richard mentioned earlier. That's top. But secondly, also to not ease and relax the measures too fast, because then we will we'll be confronted with quite a more difficult type of situation to deal with. Also from an economic perspective, from a mental health perspective, from impact on, on other diseases, as Dr. Trehan was mentioning. But then also, I would say, never miss a good crisis in a sense. And I was very happy to hear what Dr. Swarup and Dr. Hatchett mentioned. I mean, that this is really, we need to prepare for that. Next time we're better off that we we capitalize on all the knowledge and all the skills that we've acquired now, and that is something that we would make a big mistake if we don't make use of this crisis to strengthen systems, and that goes from public health systems. I mean, that we know faster, because in epidemics, it's no time to lose. I mean, the faster you act, the better. But then also in the whole area of, strengthening the R&D, and it's not just the research that we need that, but also the innovation. And one of the big lessons for me is how we were not prepared, particularly on the manufacturing type of side, for to have to prepare 1 billion doses. In the previous session, Mahima Datla from BioE, she said, we will make 1 billion. So up to now, I always thought in millions, but we have to move from the M word to the B word, from millions to billions here. And so that is, and also things that look very mundane and boring, but have far more robust clinical trials network, so that when there is a new either therapeutic or vaccine or so, we can immediately use the standard protocols, test them out. And because the reality may be that once the epidemic, and one day it will be not as bad anymore, although I believe that we will go to more of like an endemic type of situation with now and then some outbreaks, that if that's no longer headline news, that the interest will no longer be there to invest in these fundamental issues. And that's why we have to do them right now. And CEPI is a really great example of it, but what we heard from Dr. Reno Swarup was along the same lines. It was really music to my ears. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
BioAsia, it's great you're doing this. Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much, Dr. Piot. It's nice to hear from an endorsement from someone of an international repute like you to have actually told us this. Dr. Trehan said, I mean, one of our panels actually discussed about the future of hospitals and how we will be more geared up. But it's always nice to hear your thoughts on exactly, how can we be more prepared as a good healthcare infrastructure. You also spoke about the lacunas that we have, but in the given setup, how can we actually do much better than?
So first of all, let me compliment Dr. Swarup. She is with her for her commitment and push. This whole innovation segment of India has moved forward. All the incubators, we've been interacting, so I must compliment her. Second thing is, as you mentioned, the infrastructure is to be made in a way where we can rapidly move things. See, you cannot have a 100, 200, 300 beds just for COVID or a pandemic lying anywhere. But we can have a mobile system where if there is a dire need in a given area, that we could move. It's very easy to move a 50, 100 bed hospital in emergency to one location, from one to the other where it may be needed. But that's one flexibility we should build in India, which we don't have. Of course, we need to upgrade our whole system from wellness center to the primary health center to the secondary health center and the tertiary, so that it's equally distributed around the country. Today, tertiary centers are in, all of them are concentrated in metros. There is a huge gap for secondary care in the rural areas. So we need to build up the infrastructure in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The third thing, very important, is as on a global level and an India level, that we must have early warning systems. As we notice, so like you have an air control system somewhere in Norway, which controls the entire air traffic of the world, we need to get a central station where the information comes real time from around the world, and we can fight this pandemic or epidemic in its very nascent stages. Now, China did what they did. I mean, that is open to question. But the point is, so that nobody can conceal these things and make the whole world suffer. This is an unnecessary pandemic in a way. If the warning signs had come 1.5 months earlier, if the nature of the virus had been declared, I think the countries would have taken much stronger action. We stand warned for the future. So we need to take care of our environment. Tom Friedman described it very nicely, that he said this pandemic is a war between Mother Nature and Father Greed. So if we do not mend our ways, we will be victims to these kind of waves in the future for sure. And we can ill afford it, because the world is already with the back severely strained around the world. If, God forbid, there is another wave, many countries in the world will not be able to take it. So I think that we need to have that warning alive all the time. We must look over our shoulder all the time, and we must have a collaborative effort around the world that reporting of any unusual bacteria, virus, any event should be reported in the health space.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't have asked for a better wrap up. The war between Mother Nature and Father Greed, and this is a warning. This is not the end. So hopefully the world will be much better prepared. And I couldn't have asked for a more powerful and a more responsible panel of experts, and all of them have been so busy joining us from different time zones. So thank you so much for your precious time. I'm sure this is going to lead to several nice discussions and better understanding of where we stand, and hopefully from here on things will get better and better and improve from here. So thank you so much, and thanks for being a good audience also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So here we are to the end of day one of BioAsia 2021. Thank you all for tuning in with us today, and we hope you enjoyed the discussions as much as we did. Thank you to all the moderators and distinguished speakers, and a big shout out to all our partners and sponsors. Tune in with us tomorrow as we go live with some more insightful sessions covering topics like de-risking supply chains, future of medical technologies in India, creating unicorns, and reimagining R&D post-COVID world. We also have the virtual CEO conclave themed on the pursuit of innovation, and the fireside chat between the Minister, Mr. K.T. Ramarao, and Mr. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. So see you all tomorrow at another power-packed day of BioAsia 2021. Thank you.